Hello. There is a problem, a very deep and real problem that we all face. But it's so big and it's so hard to deal with that it's easier to pretend that it's not a problem at all. It's easier to deny that it's a problem because in that denial, we feel safe. Ever since the industrial age, we have been polluting our own environment. It seems bizarre, in a way, to think that we can change around a few chemicals and harm the very nature that those chemicals came from, but it is true. Volcanoes do this naturally from time to time. Meteors also do this naturally from time to time. But the environment changes when these chemicals are spewed through the air or smoke is spewed through the air. If a forest fire is raging, it changes how things are in that local area. And if it's big enough, it changes everything everywhere. The climate changes. It goes from different waves of hot and cold, up and down. But when a natural disaster like a volcano or a meteorite strikes, this changes it significantly. We've been doing this artificially via our pollution ever since the industrial age. And it's only recently, or at least somewhat recently, that this has come to the attention of the public in general. Thanks to mass media and the information superhighway, also known as the internets, we know more than we ever did before. Yet the world continues to use fossil fuel. The readily available other resources that we can use that do work makes me ask the question, why in the world are we still using fossil fuel? We at one point had an H-fuel celled car. Hydrogen fuel is viable. Buses were tested with this. What happened to it? It was just shelved and ignored. Why? I don't know. We have cars that run on water. One was invented in Japan several years ago. Why isn't that being used? I don't know. We have solar power plants, but not enough of them. We have wind power plants, but they're not as effective as the solar ones, but we don't have enough of them. And, of course, we do have water plants, but those aren't very effective either. But still, we don't have enough of them. Why not? Why is coal and oil and gasoline consumed, but these other things are left alone, by and large? Well, if I had to guess, it would be to do something with the economy and the way that the economy is structured, both in America and in the world. Oil is a depletable resource, and so its money that it generates is very high. Oil companies make a lot of money selling oil. They don't want to give the alternative until every single drop has been sold. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is how companies work. When given the opportunity to go green, companies will look at the cost involved and decide on whether or not it's cost efficient or not. Because ultimately, they don't care about the environment. No matter what they might say to the contrary, they care about every single nickel and dime that they make, down to the last penny. That's what their goal is. That's what their focus is. And don't believe them if they tell you otherwise, because it's not true. It is nice that people recycle. It is nice that people want to save the environment. And yes, we can all do a little thing here and there to help, but unless the way our economy changes, unless there are laws passed to force us to change, we're not going to succeed in making a real change. And it doesn't help that there are people who, for whatever reason, actively deny that there's a problem. Famous people, people in power, journalists, people that we should be able to trust to give us the real information are giving us the wrong information. And it isn't hard to think that maybe they've been paid off by the oil companies. Maybe they haven't, but what other reason is there for them to lie to us? I don't know. Logic can't tell me what their motives are. It can only tell me that they're lying. The facts beat out anything else. The facts and the data beat down all other opposition to it. It doesn't matter who's saying it's false or who's saying it's true. What matters is the data. Now, we turn to scientists because they understand more readily the data than we tend to. But unfortunately, scientists are human, and they too could be paid off by the oil companies to say the wrong information to us. Why would they tell us that there's a change if there isn't a change going on? Who is paying them to do that? No one. Because there's no money to be made. Who could be paying them to say that there is nothing wrong? The oil companies. It's not a conspiracy theory when we look at it this way. If there is no monetary advantage in declaring a situation, then that's probably the real situation. But we need to look at the data independent of our intuitive ideas regarding this. With all of this in mind, I turn to a journalist who is one of many who has come forward to uncover the true facts behind global warming to show us that it's really not a real thing after all, that there's controversy in the scientific community, and they bravely uncovered this somehow. If there is controversy in the scientific community, and there isn't, the question shouldn't be whether or not there is or not, but why there's controversy. What's the data showing? And maybe, just maybe, we need to do a little bit more digging as a journalist and find out if these scientists are taking bribes or getting slightly rich from certain sources, say the oil companies. But that would require integrity and true investigative abilities, something this next journalist does not display.
I want to know, why did you write a book? Why did you think it was necessary for yourself to get into this issue of climate change and to write about the subjects that you did?
Well, I left journalism after a number of years. I decided to do something else with my life, and I went off in a totally different direction. And then I started getting very annoyed and very alarmed, because every time I opened a newspaper or turned on the television, this was about 2009. It was climate change. The seas are going to overwhelm us, and the planet is going to turn into a fireball. And the coverage seemed very shallow to me. It seemed like the journalists were just repeating dogma, and they were repeating conventional wisdom, and that there was no scrutiny, and there was no there was no scrutiny at all. So I started doing a bit of my own research, just sort of out of curiosity. This doesn't sound right. This might...
So, if I can interrupt, at that at that point, did you have an overarching view on climate change?
Not at all. And I had not, as a journalist before, in my previous incarnation as a journalist, written about the environment at all. It just had not been an area of concern to me. You know, privately, I love to ride my bicycle and recycle and compost and garden, and I love nature and all those things. But the environment had never been something that I had paid any attention to. But it was the dogma and the rhetoric, and it sounded very exaggerated, and it sounded very ill-informed. So I started doing just a tiny bit of research on my own, and it didn't take me any time at all to find out that, in fact, there is a raging debate about climate in the science community, that there isn't just one point of view, that in fact there are many very credentialed, experienced, sincere scientists who have some very big doubts about the, you know, we're all going to die, the climate change is a catastrophe narrative. And I got very annoyed that I had not heard about those scientists.
And I'm getting irritated that you're not telling us these scientists' names. You're irritated that we never heard about this before, and it seems like dogma and rhetoric. Who are these scientists that are in disagreement with climate change? You just said you're irritated that we don't hear this, yet we don't get a list of all the different scientists that you have found that are in disagreement with climate change. We just get your words that there are scientists that are in disagreement. No fact-checking going on. Lazy journalism, which is what you were irritated at. Let me take a break from that for a moment and give you a few simple signs to look out for to identify a charlatan. 1, average man approach or average woman approach. I'm just a normal person. I don't have any special training. I don't know anything, and I figured this out, or I stumbled into it. I found it out somehow. Secondly, I'm the little fish in a big pond. Again, kind of playing to that I'm no one special. Thirdly, that this was easy to discover. This wasn't difficult to uncover. So it was kind of an anti-controversy. That there was a controversy going on, but no one else besides me had bothered to look into it till just now. And there are other hints, like the idea that this is being covered up by somebody more powerful, but yet for whatever reason they didn't try to silence me, because I'm so small that they didn't pay attention to me, kind of thing. So you see this with, like, pharmaceuticals. Like, the average person will just be like, yeah, I read all the different labels of all these different vitamins, and I realized if you blend them all together, you'll get a far more effective vitamin, a super vitamin. And of course, the pharmaceuticals don't want you to know this because they would lose money. So I've blended it up into this one simple pill. I'm just a normal guy. I'm a little fish. They don't want you to know this. Brr, 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 brr. Buy it from me for $90, whatever. It's the same thing, just now it's this, I'm a little journalist, or now I'm not even a journalist anymore. I retired from that to do other stuff, but I got irritated that they were making money and I wasn't. I mean, that people were saying stuff that seemed dogmatic to me. Yeah, and then I wrote a book that I want to sell. The book contains all the information that I'm not going to tell you about in this interview. I'm not going to tell you what's in the book, because you have to buy my book to read all the different things that I have in the book, what I found out, the secrets of this conspiracy. But see, if she was a real journalist and this was a real thing, it wouldn't be a book. It would be a breaking story that she came out on a major network and said, here's all the facts. Bam! Here's the thing. Bam! 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 No. That's not happening. It's not going to happen. We're not going to hear any mention of all these scientists. Of course not. What we're going to hear is more reasons to buy her book.
That I had only heard one side of the story. And so I had, one of the things I'd been dabbling in was some web design, and so I designed a website called noconsensus.org. And the purpose of that website was just to say to the public, there's another point of view out here. And if we're going to make informed decisions as a society, we should know what that other point of view is. And I don't know who's right, but there are scientists who disagree with the predominant view about climate change, and I think we should listen to them and take their views into account.
So, I haven't looked up this website to see what it says, but I am willing to bet that, 1, it doesn't tell you who these scientists are, and 2, it presents her points of view, that there's a controversy, and 3, it probably mentions her book that she wants to sell or other things that she wants to sell. A website doesn't mean anything, okay? You just admitted you don't know anything. You don't know who's right. Which means you don't know who's wrong, which means you don't know diddly. This is an argument to ignorance at best. So you should stay out of it because you didn't do the investigation well. You didn't learn. You didn't inform yourself about the issues. So you're not qualified to say that there is an issue.
So that's where it started.
Where it all started. Now that may come as something of a surprise for a lot of people because we hear and we're reminded regularly that there is apparently a 97% consensus amongst the world's climate scientists. But you're saying that you found it very easy to find people who, in your view, are very well credentialed and had every right to speak on the subject. So why is there such a disparity between what you found and what we're being told in terms of the consensus? We're told that the science is settled, that there is a consensus. The only thing remaining left to do is to take action. There's no argument, there's no debate. So how come we're being told that if there is a debate?
So what we're not going to see or hear is the number of climate scientists that there are in existence and how many that she found that agree and or disagree with climate change, quote unquote. So that's a problem. Let's just say that there was 1,000 in total and she found 100. Now 100 without being told the 1,000 number seems like a lot of people. I found 100 scientists that disagree with climate change. And then you're leaving out the statistic of that there's actually 900 that agree with it. You're making it seem inflated. But here, we're not being given any numbers at all. We're being given a number on one side, which is this is what we hear, but what's the truth? And she doesn't give any percentage. She just says there's a controversy, and it was easy to find, and there's a number of scientists who we're not hearing from. Why are we not hearing from them? Why didn't you write down their names? Who are these scientists? Why don't you give them a voice? Why don't you give them a platform? You obviously were able to get a time slot with this guy. Why not be there with all the scientists who disagree with climate change? They're with you. Because then
Well, I think there are a few reasons. One of them is that many journalists, unfortunately, are very sloppy.
Hypocrite, hypocrite, hypocrite.
Some of them are rushed. You know, they have to produce more with less time, and climate science, you know, it took me about a year of reading a lot of books and doing a lot of research before I felt comfortable saying much at all about what was going on in climate science.
1 year to learn a complicated subject like climate science? I don't know about that. Okay, what have you learned so far about it? Can you tell us anything? No, you just know stuff about it. Okay.
It's a pretty big learning curve. So if you are just an ordinary journalist, general assignment journalist, you've been given the job of going and covering this climate change event where some famous scientist is saying that the world is about to end if we don't do something drastic, you don't really know any better. You know, you really can't be expected to know any better. So between, you know, inexperienced journalists, rushed journalists, and sloppy journalists, a lot of stuff is reported as fact, which is not fact.
According to your own standards, you are also a sloppy journalist. It didn't take you that long to find out, so you were rushed. 2, it wasn't hard to find, so that's kind of sloppy because you didn't dig deeper. And you didn't know anything about it going in. It took you supposedly a year, which now your story has slightly changed from before, to be comfortable enough to write it. But a year, is that really long enough? And have you demonstrated any knowledge on this so far? When I say, hey, I know about informal logic, I don't just go, hey, I know about it, and that's it. I demonstrate that I know about it, and I am able to summon from my brain different facts about it offhand, and I can rattle them off to you. Okay? There's a difference between saying that you know something and demonstrating that you know something. She is not demonstrating that she knows anything about it. I haven't heard her say anything like any fluctuation, anything that sounds even remotely scientific from her mouth yet. And then to just say, well, famous scientists say that it is going on. Well, why are they saying that? Forget the fact that they're famous, because that's an appeal to novelty. Why are they saying that there's something going on if supposedly there are other scientists who disagree? See, because science isn't like a vote where you just say, okay, who of us is really cool and popular? Okay, you go tell everyone what's going on. No, that's not how things work. Oh, well, whatever. We're not done with the sloppy journalism that you're presenting, so what else do you have to say?
And then there's the other big problem, and that's that if you do a survey of journalists, any survey I've ever heard of in any country around the world, most journalists will self-identify as being left of center. Entitled to be left of center, but being left of center comes with some baggage. And one of the things that left of center people tend to be is very fervent environmentalists. And so rather than being a hard-nosed reporter who's skeptical of everything and is not going to take anyone's word for anything, the people on the environmental beat as journalists tend to go native.
Okay, but what's your political agenda? Since we're dragging that into this and muddying the waters, of course, poisoning the well, what is your political leanings? Everyone has their own presuppositions. Everyone has their own agenda. Except mine is perfect and clean, and I'm fine. My agenda is to tell you the truth. Oh. Right. Yeah, so since we're muddying the waters, what's your agenda? Nope, not gonna find that out, are we?
They tend to start seeing themselves as part of the cause, or helping the cause, helping get that message out. So they are, and I think shamefully, totally abandoning their duty to the public.
Every time she lies, her eyeballs get bigger. She gets like big eyes. Like, I would love to play poker with her because she was just big eyes. Oh yeah, I don't have a good hand. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm folding.
It is not your role as a journalist to tell the public what the truth is. Your role is to tell them what's going on so that they can make their own informed decision.
Wait, what? Your role is to not tell them what the truth is? Here's what's going on. But if that's not what the truth is, then how can I make an informed decision? How does this work again?
Where does this 97% figure come from? This idea that there is a 97% consensus?
Well, the 97% has come up on a few occasions, and my understanding is that it is the result of some very flawed surveys of the scientific literature, not of scientists, because to my knowledge, no one has ever polled scientists.
All right, now she's just lying. Now she is just lying. Do we get to see these polls? What's her investigative reporting showing us about these polls? How did she know that those polls are sloppy? Who are doing these polls? Do we get to find out any information about the polls? No, of course not. You know what we need? Here's what we need. Let's get some real scientists to weigh in on this issue.
Despite the noise about uncertainty in the political arena,
warming will actually save lives, not endanger them.
Do I believe scientists? No! The fundamentals of climate change have been understood by scientists for decades. To start with, there are naturally occurring gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane in the Earth's atmosphere. In themselves, they aren't bad. In fact, we need them in limited quantities to keep our atmosphere at just the right temperature for life as we know it to exist on Earth. But if we produce an excess of these gases, as we have, the temperature rises, as it has. If you want, you can replicate this effect yourself in a simple lab experiment. Here's how. Take 2 identical bottles and set them side by side. Put a thermometer in each bottle and seal them. Then run a hose from a source of CO2 into one of the bottles. Shine 2 heat lamps of equal intensity at equal distance onto each one. Within minutes, you will see the temperature of the bottle with the carbon dioxide in it rising faster and higher.
Alright, so that's Bill Nye narrating this video about climate change, explaining about how it works, what it is, and the fact that it's well understood. Okay, so is there a controversy?
What about the fact that is the overwhelming consensus of all the climate scientists?
That's not true.
It is true.
No,
yes, it is.
There is no overwhelming.
You're in the bubble, Bob. You're in the bubble. You're in the bubble. You have to shout at the bubble. The only scientist. Now here we have a scientist right here.
I was trying to stay out of that
one. No, wait a second. There's a scientist right here.
You know, historically, there's a saying in the scientific community that every great scientific truth goes through 3 phases. First, people deny it.
Right.
Second, they say it conflicts with the Bible. Third, they say they've known it all along. And so we just have to ask, where are we in this scale of this
conflicts with the Bible.
so
we've actually gone backwards, excuse me. We've actually gone backwards because 20 years ago, Republicans did believe that climate change was happening. They just had a different way to approach it, cap and trade, which is now the Democratic answer. And somehow now the Republicans have moved to it's a hoax, it's not happening at all.
No,
so how do you explain
what
that?
I have seen is that at the early phases of this, people were in denial of any global warming at all, the naysayers. Then, as the evidence kept building, they said, okay, we accept that the Earth is getting warmer, but humans are not responsible for it. So there's some incremental acquiescence there that no one seems to be talking about. But what I pay attention to is, so if you don't want to believe all the scientists, I have another way for you to approach the problem, and that is you can take your cue from the rest of the animal and plant kingdom. Animals are migrating in different rates. Plants are migrating north that never made it north before because they can now sustain the warmth that is there. They're plants that are getting fertilized earlier than before. The migration patterns have shifted. And so nature is telling us nature already knows the answer to what it is everyone here is arguing about. That's how I get my cues.
Name me one prediction of the International Panel of Climate Change, which made predictions in 91, 96, 2001.
They're all worse. They're worse than they predicted.
No.
Yeah.
The oceans were going to get hot.
They are.
Remember Al Gore in
the oceans are
Remember
hotter.
Al Gore in Inconvenient Truth, waving his arms over the Gulf of Mexico, saying, "If you thought Katrina was bad, you ain't seen nothing yet." We haven't had any serious hurricane.
You know what we could do? Here's what we can do.
The Florida Keys are supposed to have disappeared by now.
Okay, you know
I have a house there.
Here's what we could do.
Okay.
By the way, I think conserving the environment is conservative, right? Isn't that what conservation means? Is
we all
conservative.
agree.
What you can do is, we can take everyone who denies the consensus of the. Okay.
Science doesn't operate.
Sure.
on
If you want to say
you know it.
Science doesn't operate on consensus?
No. Science operates as the
it operates on a consensus of experiments.
No, there are tipping points, where everyone, at first they didn't all believe in evolution, and then 50 years later, yes, the consensus was it was true, and now we move on to the next thing.
Are you prepared to put your money where your ideas are.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then you're prepared. So here's the experiment. You take all the scientists who authored these papers, get them to pool their money, and invest in companies that would benefit from global warming. And take all the people who are in denial of global warming, take all their money, invest in companies that would presume there is no global warming. And I predict, you want a prediction? I predict that you will all go broke in the next 50 years.
And I will predict exactly the opposite.
Okay, so why play that entire clip? Well, because I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. But he makes great points. First and foremost, the point that he made by not saying anything is he didn't say, oh, yeah, there is a debate among scientists. He didn't say that. Okay, but he didn't say there wasn't. He didn't need to, I don't think. He certainly implied that it was agreed upon. And he said, forget about the scientists. Ignore them. Look at the data. That's what he points to, rightly points to. He says, forget about that. If you can't trust, for whatever stupid, idiotic, moronic reason, the scientists who are in agreement, and he implicitly implies that they are, with this, then look at the data. Look at the animals and the plants that are migrating north that before weren't. And as far as making a bet to which companies would do better if there is going to be global warming than those companies that ignore global warming, that's a bet that Neil will win. But it's a bet that we as humanity can't really wage, because we'll lose in the long run if we're wrong. We won't hurt anything or anyone other than certain global oil companies or, car companies or things like that by turning green. It won't hurt things. It will only help things. It might hurt your pocketbook, but who cares about your pocketbook in face of survival in the long run? Your pocketbook will grow, that's great, but then when you die early because the environment has changed and you're unable to adapt that quickly, then your pocketbook won't matter. Okay, so Pascal's wager. How does Pascal's wager play into this, you might ask? Good question. Pascal's wager, what? This sounds like Pascal's wager, doesn't it? What I just said kind of sounds like that. Either there is global change or there isn't global change concerning the weather, and either humans are contributing to it or not. We're going to assume that the safer bet is that humans are contributing to it and that it is happening. And therefore, we're placing our wager on that that's the truth, because to assume otherwise is too dangerous. Unlike Pascal's wager, we actually have the data to confirm all of this ideas. Unlike Pascal's wager, which is a nebulous idea that there's going to be a divine punishment or a divine reward based on what you believe is true, this is something that we're acting upon. Whether or not we believe that global warming is the result of human activity, changing our policies to be green, clean policies will not hurt anything or anyone. It will only help us in the long run, just in case we are really affecting things. If not, then things will get hotter and then they'll cool down again and we'll be just fine. And you know what? There's going to be other benefits of having less pollution. Less people will get sick. We have drawn parallels to people being sick and there being pollution. So we know that pollution is bad. It's not like it's something that we don't know isn't really bad. We know that it's bad. So stopping it isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. So what's the problem here? It's a safe bet to make. There isn't any controversy. Neil basically says, no, there isn't a controversy, but he's defending it using reason and even trying to use monetary gain. And so the other guy just doesn't see it because he sees this short-range gain, not the long range, and he's too busy making money to look at the data, I guess. All right, fine. But maybe there's scientists that say it's not as bad as what we think. Yes, there is. Here's one right now.
Extreme weather was more frequent in recent years. Is it a sign that global warming is gaining pace and exceeding predictions?
Now, has extreme weather been more frequent in recent years? The evidence is definitely to the contrary. The United States has always had extreme weather. We look back on our weather history. It's been punishing. Floods, droughts, tornadoes, hurricanes, great forest fires. Is global warming happening? No doubt about it. We're living in a warmer world. We're living in a melting world. Sea levels are rising. Now, direct evidence of the footprint or the fingerprint of global warming, we're seeing more frequent, more intense, and longer-lasting heat waves. As far as hurricanes, tornadoes, forest fires, floods, and drought, the evidence is definitely not in. The consensus among almost all scientists is that it's a small fingerprint, not a large footprint. But what is true is that in this country, in the United States, we live in many areas with great risk to drought, to tornadoes, to hurricanes. And so part of the dialogue is not only extreme weather and global warming, but is the amount of risk we can tolerate. Now, looking to the future, global change, global warming, it definitely is accelerating, and it will have an impact on extreme weather. But at this point, not much.
So here you go. This is an example of honest reporting. Here's a scientist who said exactly almost polar opposite of what Neil and Bill Nye just talked about. He said, yes, there's an impact, but the human impact is a fingerprint, not a footprint. But what I'm leaving out is, when was this scientist interviewed? What date was he interviewed? See, because that matters. When was he interviewed versus now? Has the data changed? Yes. Has his opinion changed? I don't know. Let's ask him again. Because this isn't his current data. If this is from earlier, then the data might be different today and he might have a different view today. So I am not giving you everything because I'm not cherry picking, but I am not giving you all the data that you need. You're being presented with half-truths. But even though you are being presented with half-truths, you're still being presented a far more complete picture than journalist Nimrod was presenting you with. I gave you two scientists that said yes, and one scientist who said, yeah, but it's not as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. But let's zero in on what is the issue. Is it the polling that's going on? Because he said the majority of climate scientists think this, and Neil seemed to suggest otherwise, and so did Bill Nye. So, who is doing this polling? And what does that polling really say? And what is the polling questions that are being asked? And what scientists are being asked this question? What's going on there? We need to know. We need to know based on the data, not someone that says they know what the data is, but on what the actual data is. So here is this poll published by these people. Here's what it asked. Here's who they asked. There you go. That would be actual journalistic reporting. It would be a screen full of facts and figures that you could double check independent of what that person says to make sure that that poll wasn't weighted one way or the other. We're going to see that from this journalist? Of course not! But I'm not done because there's more about climate change. So let's look at one more thing and then I'll return to our sloppy journalists.
There are already beginning to be effects of 1 or 2 degrees warming, and if we get 5 or 10 degrees warming, several decades downstream, there will be huge effects.
GISS scientists came to these results after analyzing information from 3 sources: data from more than 1,000 weather stations around the globe, satellite observations of sea surface temperature, and measurements from Antarctic research stations. So what's the cause of this long-term warming trend? While there are several natural processes that can cause subtle climate warming or cooling, like variations in solar activity, fluctuations in ocean currents, and volcanic eruptions, climate scientists believe that the rising levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are the dominant factor driving the rise.
If we want to limit climate change and keep it under an additional 1 degree Celsius or 2 degrees Fahrenheit, we would need to begin to decrease the CO2 emissions gradually so that by the end of the century, CO2 stopped increasing.
So while 2009's temperature may not have been the global record breaker, it is in line with the long-term trend telling scientists that the planet is getting warmer.
Given the choice between NASA and some journalist, I think I'll go with NASA. I have several links for you at the bottom in the description for you to look at yourself. So, let me recap. Sloppy reporting, not giving you all the information, not being honest about all the information. Now, I am being honest with you. I am presenting you clips from videos, not the full videos, because otherwise my video would be way long. And I'm giving you links to those original videos. And you can go watch the entire video yourself. And I'm also telling you that this is a half-truth. I am telling you that you get to be skeptical of my conclusion. I am telling you not to jump the gun and go where I'm saying. I'm telling you that my argumentation is simply that we should bet on that pollution is bad, something we already know, and that we should reduce or eliminate CO2 emissions that we are creating. That's my argument. It's essentially Pascal's wager, but for climate change. And the difference, I already said, but I'll say again, is that we actually have mounds of data to look at for the climate problem versus Pascal's wager, which we have no data to look at. So my argument's stronger. But you could still get to be skeptical of it because I have some logical fallacies in there with the half-truths that I've presented. So what do? Here's what you do. You investigate. Is this a real phenomenon? Well, I think Bill Nye's experiment from earlier highlights how we can show that it's a real phenomenon. CO2, which is something that we are producing, makes things get hotter. The more we add, the hotter it's going to get. We keep adding it. Well, is it cumulative? Good question. I'll let you decide and find out for yourself. By the way, by decide, I don't just mean flip a coin. I mean go investigate and find the information for yourself. If you don't want to go through all that time and trouble and energy, as many of us are lazy and will let laziness prevails, maybe then my argumentation, flawed as it might be, will do something to make you think about it a little bit harder. My argumentation, of course, not being very good. Why would I tell you that? Because it's honest. That's integrity. I don't know a dang thing about climate. But these scientists do. These people do. The one guy said it wasn't that big of an impact. NASA says, yeah, there's stuff going on. And if we reduce the CO2 emissions that we make, duh, it's going to get less bad. Maybe this is a natural part of it, but we seem to be making it worse. It's not that difficult to find out. Wait a minute, I said that was a thing that charlatans say. Okay, but it isn't, okay? Here's the data. Like what Neil said, let's look at the data and decide based on the data. Forget what people say. Ignore that. Let's just go to the data. Things are changing. Stuff is going on. Maybe stuff has been going on. Maybe we're making too much of it. Dare we risk that? Some people are like, yeah, sure, let's risk it. Whatever, who cares? Others are like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't risk it. Maybe, since we already know that pollution is bad, maybe we need to start doing something about it now, rather than later. Okay. But everything that I have said to you is honest, from start to finish. Here's my opinions, here's my viewpoints, here's my arguments. They are flawed. You get to be skeptical. Here's a video that disagrees with me. You now have far more information than you did coming into this. You get to disagree. Maybe you don't think that climate change is a real thing. Fine. Great. Wonderful. Where's your data? And by climate change, maybe we mean two different things. So maybe there's a natural language problem going on. When I say it, let's just say climate change due to humans, okay? So human climate change. We'll shorten it to HCC. Human climate change. So anyone that says, yes, that's a real phenomenon, you can just say in the comment that you're going to post below, along with whatever other comments you might have for me, just so I have a poll going on. It won't mean anything because we can't vote in reality, but I just want to know your views. Yes, HCC, yes, you do think that humans are contributing to it. Or no, CC, or maybe, or question mark if you don't know. Maybe or question mark either way to indicate you don't know. Alright? Let's just take a poll amongst ourselves and tell each other our views on this and maybe write why. Here's my data. Here's this data. Maybe we don't have enough data. Maybe we're getting conflicting data and that's confusing the bleep out of us. Fine. Great. Wonderful. That's all good. I have no problem with that. That's why I present somebody in my own thing that says, yeah, it's a thing, but it's not really that big of a thing. But what I'm pointing out in this video, beyond that, yes, climate change, in my viewpoint, is being caused, by and large, at least today, by humans, and or we are harming the climate, and we are changing the climate by our actions. That is my stance. Human climate change, yes to that from my stance. But that's a secondary point to the other point I'm trying to make in this video. Here is a journalist, or a former journalist at any rate, who has written a book who says that there's this controversy and says that she didn't like that there's dogma being spewed by people, and that she found out that there were scientists against this, or there were people that deserve to be heard and they're not being heard. But what we don't see in any of that interview, what we don't hear, is any sources or anything that's against her position at all. That is not honesty, that is not integrity. But remember what she said. Journalism isn't about telling you the truth. It's about telling you what's going on. I still don't understand how the bleep that works, but that's her view of what journalism is. So given that, she's trying to tell you what's going on by not telling you what's going on.
And ask them, you know, some very, very specific but also very intelligent questions. For example, everyone is going to tell you, whether they are a skeptic or you know, an alarmist with respect to climate change, that climate change happens. Of course climate change happens. You know, here in Canada, 20,000 years ago, we were buried under a couple miles of ice.
Okay, I changed my mind. Her eyeballs get bigger whenever she doesn't know what the bleep she's talking about and or she's lying. I don't know. Maybe I'm overanalyzing it. Moving on.
You know, that ice has been receding for 20,000 years. And back then, there were no SUVs and there was no heavy industry. You know, the ice has been receding all on its own. It's part of natural climate change. Nothing ever stays static in nature. Things are always changing. So if you say, do you believe in climate change? Everyone is going to say yes. Every scientist is going to say yes. So that is not a useful question.
Right.
A useful question would be, do you think that human-generated CO2 emissions or human-generated greenhouse gases is a significant contributor to what we are seeing now? That would be a more intelligent question.
Right. That's what I asked earlier. I asked you to put in the comments, your comments, whether or not you're somebody that says, yes, human climate change, yes, HCC, no HCC, maybe HCC, or question mark HCC, however you want to go with that. Maybe being sort of, it's kind of a cause, but it's one contributing factor, or question mark, I just don't know, whatever, okay? I didn't make it very clear, okay? Yes, for you agree, no, you don't agree, maybe that it's somewhere in between, question marks for I don't know, okay? Everyone got that? Okay, good. All right, so yeah, I agree. What's your answer, journalist person? Are you going to tell us what you think?
But that's not the kinds of survey questions that are being asked. So anyway,
I guess the answer is no. What surveys? Who's asking the where's the list of surveys? Maybe it's in her book that she wants us to buy. I don't know. Moving on.
Some very, very flawed surveys of literature in the scientific literature have been used to come up with this 97%. But, you know, when you look at the methodology of those surveys, there's tons of problems. They're not reputable. But the side of the debate that is very concerned about climate change will seize on that 97% headline, and they're actually not very rigorous about looking underneath to see whether, you know, is this reputable research or not.
This is the most softball interview ever. I mean, yes. The guy's not asking her questions at all. He's just agreeing with whatever she's saying. So, I have a problem with that. But, okay, so where's the data for all these polls to show that the methodology of these polls is flawed? Why don't we talk about that? Here's a chart that I brought with me. Here's this poll. Here's that poll. I know I mentioned it before. I know I said this before. But where is it? Okay? You want to say that this is true, you want us to believe that it's true, then the burden of proof is on you to produce that data. Is it in your book? At least say, well, I have it all in my book or something, but you're not even telling us that it's in your book. You're just saying that it's true without anything to support it at all. And I guess it's in your book, I don't know, but maybe that's what this is leading up to. I have all this written in my book. I don't know, but give me something to work with here.
For example, we're told that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is supposed to be this body of the world's top scientists, and they all agree that climate change is a big problem and it's caused by humans and it's going to be catastrophic. Well, that's absolutely false, because those scientists who work on those reports are not polled.
So why aren't they polled? And who are those scientists? And why didn't you poll them yourself? Or get an independent agency to poll them for you, which would be far better and far more proof towards your ideas here. So you found out, hey, they're not being polled. All right. That's it. I'm done. I'm just going to tell everyone, hey, they weren't polled. Do something. Yeah, take your own money and put your money where your mouth is, and get an independent agency to poll them, or at the very least, do it yourself. Say, what's your name? Joe Schmo, okay. Yes or no, blah, yes or no, blah, yes or no. Here's the poll of questions that I asked them. Here's when I asked them. Here's their things that we can confirm that I asked them these questions. You know, their contact information or whatever, their representative that will say yes that they answered these questions, blah, blah, blah. There you go. Oh, that would take energy and effort and actual investigative skills and actual journalism, which you were complaining that people weren't doing. So we're not going to do that.
No one asked them on an individual basis, do you agree with that statement? In fact, only a few dozen people who work on one particular chapter, which is the attribution chapter of an IPCC report, get to make a decision and express a viewpoint about whether this is predominantly linked to human activity. A very small number. So, 97% of scientists have never been asked that question. So, the perception that that's the case is it's wrong, and it doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of effort to do some very rudimentary research online and find that out.
What? What? Online? Online. Okay, I'm done. I'm not going to play more. You can watch her entire little segment with this yes man on your own, okay? There's more I could analyze, but I'm done at this point. I'm done. Because I think that this proves my case. And if you want to argue with me, fine, I'm willing to do a debate. And remember, my point in this video, by the way, if you are like, oh, I want to debate Deconverted Mind on climate change. No. I don't want to debate climate change. I want to debate whether or not this journalist is somebody that actually did journalistic reporting here. That's what I would debate, okay? So if you want to use the rest of her video to try to make the case that she did do a good job, or maybe you use her book and the website that she made to give a better case, I'll debate that. I'll do more research into it. But what I've been presented here in this particular interview with her is that this is somebody that hasn't done the investigative reporting that I would want someone to do. She whines in the very beginning that she's upset that people are saying things that seem dogmatic. She's upset that people aren't being good journalists. And then she goes and does sloppy journalism to uncover that people aren't getting pulled, doesn't bother to ask them anything, but actually it's all online. It wasn't that I'm imagining in my head her going physically to different laboratories and setting up interviews with scientists or calling them first, I guess, before you just go there physically in person. But you call them, you set up an interview, you ask them the questions, maybe you ask them on the phone rather than in person, whatever. I didn't envision that this was all going online through, like, Google search or something. Like, is climate change real? Oh, look, there's a controversy. Okay, well, I guess I've done my research. I thought she was, like, actually calling scientists to find out. Different laboratories, Berkeley Laboratory, for example, or calling colleges to find out, hey, who's a climate scientist? How do I find out who is and who isn't a climate scientist? Start there. How do I even find out that information? Going to NASA, calling up NASA. Hey, who's a climate scientist? I'm a journalist, or I used to be. Can I talk to somebody that's a climate scientist? I'm wanting to find out more about this. I'm wanting to compile information. I'm wanting to make a poll. How do I go about making a poll? Maybe I could contact a legitimized polling place like Gallup polls. Maybe I could talk to them. How much does it cost to do a poll? If I feel like these polls aren't being done, maybe I should buy a poll from them. Maybe if I don't feel like they're doing a good enough job, I can do it myself. How do I do that? No, none of that's done. I'm just going to go online and find out what's going on and not do any actual research at all. Alright, thank you for taking your time to listen. I know that this was a long one, but I had a lot to cover. In the comments below, please indicate yes, no, maybe, or question mark in regards to human climate change. And also for bonus fun, whether or not you think that the journalist was a lazy journalist, which was the main portion of what I was trying to make my point of being in this video. If you disagree with me so strongly that you want to have a debate about this journalist being a lazy journalist, I would be happy to do this. If you want to debate climate change, I don't know enough about it, so I won't debate you about it until I have actually learned enough about it, which will take me several years to do. Please post your question, comments, concerns, complaints, etc. below, along with these two poll questions that I have on the screen for you. Thank you so much for listening, and take care. I don't have a way to end this, so unless and until I do, I have to continue to sign off bizarrely.
Can't read mine, no he can't read my poker face. She's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no he can't read my poker face. She's got to love nobody. Pop 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 poker face, pop pop poker face. Pop 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 poker face, pop pop poker face. Pop 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 poker face, pop pop poker face. Pop 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 poker face, pop pop poker face. Oh no you can't read mine. Pop pop poker face, talk about my poker face. Pop 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 poker face.